My name is Michael, and I'm the Inside Communications Director for Human San Quentin. The contents of this episode include strong language and graphic descriptions of violent crimes that may include sexual assault. This podcast is intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello, and welcome to the Prison Podcast. I'm your host, Diane Kahn, Executive Director of Humans of San Quentin, and we're grateful to have you with us today. The Prison Podcast brings forward the voices of survivors of violent crimes and their convicted offenders, unearthing stories excluded from public conversation. The podcast centers around the transformative process of the victim-offender dialogue, a facilitated meeting within a prison setting that brings together someone who has experienced harm and the person responsible for causing it. Each episode features a candid conversation with someone who has completed the extensive victim-offender dialogue program, offering profound insights into the power of vulnerability and self-reflection. By drawing back the curtain on the complex relationships forged by harm, the Prison Podcast provides a platform for healing, empathy, and understanding. Unlike traditional true crime media, the podcast emphasizes personal agency and the journey of reconciliation, transforming societal attitudes and fostering emotional connection. Through these powerful conversations, we hope to inspire individual change, promote healing within our communities, and support a more compassionate understanding of justice. Today, we're joined by Christopher, a survivor of repeated sexual assault, whose resilience shines through the shadows of past trauma. His journey has been marked by deeply sensitive and challenging experiences, including moments that touch on issues involving minors. With that in mind, listener discretion is advised. Christopher's openness and strength in sharing his story offer a powerful insight into healing and hope. I'm grateful to sit with him as he sheds light on his journey and the strength that brought him here. Thank you, Christopher, for sharing your heart and story with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Sure. So, Christopher, today we're here to talk about your crime, even though it's not something that I ever bring up with people that are incarcerated. Don't feel like it's my business. And I also don't feel like somebody should share something if they don't want to. So I'm going to let you start us off, and you can decide where you want to bring us into your story and how much of your crime you want to share.
Well, I guess we just get right into the heart of why I was in prison. I was in prison for rape and kidnapping of two teenage girls at two different times, a few months apart. They didn't know each other. They were strangers to me. I abducted them and sexually assaulted them. I was convicted of both crimes and didn't take responsibility at the time. It took me some time to figure that out and how to do that. I was sentenced ultimately to 96 years to life. So I served 25 years due to changes in the law, and afforded me an opportunity to go to the board where I was found suitable on my initial hearing. And since then, I've been out for about 6 months now. During the 25 years that I spent in prison, it took me a few years to come to terms with my crimes, taking responsibility. I was in a state of delusion and denial, and I couldn't deny it. I couldn't delude myself that I was not in prison. I was in prison. All my delusions were crashing around me, and I couldn't deny that I was in prison. So once that kind of came, the truth, the reality of it started to set in, I realized I needed to figure out why I did those things, especially coming from the loving and nurturing background I had as a kid, coming from a home, a well middle class, loving home, two parents. I had a great life. How did I turn out to be this, what I believe to be a monster? How did I do these things? I served my country honorably in the Marines. How did I decide that this was the thing to do. So once that kind of came to me, I realized I had to change. And it wasn't because I was hoping for one day to be out. I did hope for that, but it wasn't that I was going to get my way out in that way. I didn't know about the laws changing or anything at that time. I just knew that if I was going to spend the rest of my life in prison, I wanted to be a better person. I wanted to create some healing, to, apologize, to change, and somehow just make the world a little bit better. So I started on the path. I asked some friends about going to groups, and I started going to a Christian 12-step group. And the first step was like the biggest hurdle for me, is admitting that I was powerless and being honest in that. So once I was able to do that and be honest, it was so relieving to actually be honest and take accountability. And accountability to me is more than just being honest and admitting what I did. It's trying to make it right. So about 20 years ago, I started on this path. And there's a little gap there, 25 years to 20 years, right? So it took me 5 years to finally come to terms with that and say, hey, look, I need to do something. So it was a long and hard process. I started by telling my family that I was responsible for this, and going to groups and learning about why I committed these things. And ultimately, the biggest influences of my life was the sexual harm that was committed against me. I was a victim of sexual assault by 3 or 4 different people. And it is in my mind and my memory, it is kind of fragmented because over all these years, I've tried to bury it. And I was unable to. And it really influenced the decisions I made in my life. As a kid, I couldn't forgive the kid in me for letting those things happen. I thought there was something really effed up with me because these things were happening to me. So as a kid, I had to do the best I could and cope with this. And it was denying that it happened. And it was not pretending that it didn't happen. And splitting basically my reality. And that's the beginning of the process of how I could be a good person in one area and be this horrible person in another.
But I don't know how comfortable you feel about it, but I have not heard or talked to someone who's committed the kind of crime that you have to somebody. But are you comfortable going back and telling me more in detail about your crime and what happened and what that was about for you and what you were thinking or feeling then?
During my time as I was growing up, I had outlets to express the anger and rage that I had inside me. And sports was a big part of that. Athletics, that was my way to prove my manhood. And then I went into the Marines, and another outlet for me, being able to express my anger and rage through violence. That was the reoccurring theme, is violence. So when I was out of the Marines, I was back in the civilian world. I didn't have that anymore. I didn't have sports. I didn't have the military. So that anger never left. That anger, that rage never left. And I had a belief system that you hurt people before they can hurt you. You take advantage of the weak. I had a really distorted view of the world, and I kept it hidden. And it's so crazy because these delusions are so twisting that it doesn't even make any sense, to somebody that doesn't experience that. So I could be this great person who works with people and who gives to the community, but at the same time, be this monster at night, victimizing people. I was married at the time, and I was cheating on my wife constantly with no remorse, and I hid it. And so I was living this double life. So at the time of my crimes, I was out driving around looking for prostitutes. And I ran into my survivor. She was a teenager, and I picked her up. I forced her into my car. I abducted her, and I assaulted her. Then my delusions kicked in, and I thought, well, hey, no, she liked it. She didn't resist too much, so I got her phone number and called her, to meet up with her again, thinking that it was okay, that she really wanted to do this with me, and that's the delusions of it, the twisted thinking. And by doing that, I was arrested. I went to go meet her, and the police were there. So my second victim, or survivor, excuse me, I wasn't caught for that crime until after I was convicted of this. It was like a cold case. So she was really my first survivor that I assaulted, and it was in similar fashion. But I had actually went out with her before, so I didn't know her. But again, I forced myself on her, and then I abandoned her. And she called the police, and it just didn't go anywhere until I was convicted of the second crime. And my DNA was in the system, and that popped up, and I was convicted of that assault as well. So it took me some time to realize, why I was doing these things. It was out of selfishness. It was out of distorted beliefs, and that distorted beliefs reflected on my thinking and how I used sex as a coping mechanism. What I thought of women, the patriotic views I had of women, the womanizing, the toxic masculinity, just all those things. It took the time to figure all those things, those influences in my life, and where the source of it all came from. And it came from my own victimization. And I don't want to say this is an excuse, because it's not. It's just an influence. I still chose those behaviors. I still could have went out and asked for help, but I didn't do those things. I chose to stay in my delusions. I chose to act out and do the things that I made all those decisions. I am responsible for all that. Nobody else is. Not anybody that harmed me before. I still made those things. So I'm 100% responsible for the pain that I've caused a lot of people.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for sharing that. I've only ever heard about people that I know of you to be on the news, so I haven't heard of someone talk about it so candidly. And it's interesting for you to see, or while you're there doing that act, to make those excuses for yourself as to why it was okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It sounds like one of the women came to your parole hearing. So you actually, it was probably during COVID, right? So you had her on Zoom. So tell me what you had done. I mean, I'm assuming you had to prepare yourself somehow, and what that process was leading up to that, and what were your feelings surrounding it?
Well, I've been doing a lot of recovery work. I was working with the HISMA through Realize, a program in the prison. And I was really able to uncover a lot of the trauma that I experienced, and why I wanted to there's expression, hurt people. And I realized that, because of my own pain, I wanted to share that with other people, not in a nice way. I wanted to inflict what I had experienced on other people. And that was how I kind of lived my life at the time. So once I started to understand that, and became more willing to be vulnerable, to share my experiences, to share what happened to me, show what I've done, it broke what I think was the crux of really me from ever telling my parents about what happened to me. I didn't tell my family about what happened to me until I was like almost 50 years old, or about 50. I told them about everything. And they were just shocked by it. They blamed themselves for not seeing it. It was hard, because they took a lot of responsibility that they didn't have any responsibility in that. Parents, I know, they blame themselves for a lot of the things that happens to their kids, and they were at no fault. It was the people that harmed me. It was their fault. And I think with a lot of survivors, they have that similar experience. What did I do? What's wrong with me? Why did they pick me? So in the groups that I have attended, the Realize group, we had the ability to talk to other survivors. And that's how I met Jane. And I was able to share with her the why, because I did it. I was able to answer the why out for myself, because I was actually a perpetrator as well as a survivor. So I knew that was one of the things I wanted to know. Why me? It had nothing to do with me. It was nothing I did. It was my perpetrator, my offender that had the issue. And that's what I explained to Jane. It was nothing about you. You were just there, and the person targeted you. It had nothing to do with who you are as a person. And that's relieving, I think, for a lot of survivors to understand that they're not responsible for what somebody else's behavior is. I think that, it helped bring some answers to her and some relief. And so once I was able to kind of figure those things out and work, like I said, my objective when I was going to the board is, of course, I want to go home. I want to see my family. But I didn't go to the board with that intention. I went to the board with the intention, with the hope that my survivors would be there and they would be able to hear from me how truly sorry and remorseful I am for what I did to them, how I robbed them of a future. I robbed them of experiences of not ever knowing what that experience was about. And that I understood and imagined what they must have went through after that. Fearing men, being afraid to be alone, PTSD, maybe even thoughts of suicide. How I might have financially burdened them with therapy, from these experiences. So that's what I wanted to convey to my survivors, to explain those kind of things and answer whatever the board wanted to know, the questions that they had. And there was points where I just was blunt. I said, I just didn't care about people at the time. I care about what I wanted. And that's all that mattered to me. It was what I wanted. I wanted to escape the crappy feeling that I was feeling about myself. And I thought that would make me feel better. And it never did.
And can you break that down a little bit for me? Because people often say that the act of rape is not so much about the rape, but it's actually getting control of someone. Can you speak to that?
Yeah. There's a thing called the zero state. And essentially I feel so out of control that I can't control my own life and the things that are going around me. And whether it's true or not, whether it's a perception, because I was pretty successful when I was out there. I had a good job, but I didn't think it was good enough. I had a house. I was married. I had a big house. I had nice cars. I had clothes. I had money. But that wasn't enough. I thought it was a failure. It's because that's how I thought about myself. People may have looked at me, you're a winner, bro. I didn't think that. I didn't think that at all about myself. I thought that was something wrong with me. Like that little kid that would keep resurfacing. There's something wrong with me. I'm not getting what I'm supposed to be getting. I'm not having what I'm supposed to be having because there's something wrong with me. So if I can't control my life, my biggest urge is to have control. And my default was what happened to me. I didn't have control when I was a kid, when these people were victimizing me. So it felt like, hey, that was my default. Let me see if I can control somebody else. That will make me feel better. And sex for me was a coping mechanism. The way I use sex in my life, it always made me feel better. but it was only temporary. It was never holy because I couldn't even commit emotionally and spiritually in my relationships. So my marriage was falling apart like crazy because I couldn't be vulnerable with my wife. I had never told her about my experience as a kid. I would never tell her that because I was so ashamed of it. And by withholding that, by not being able to express those things, I'm denying a genuineness in my relationships. And with the thought that, hey, this is going to end one day, so I better get the better end of this before it ends. That mentality of, let me hurt you before you hurt me. Because my experience is people are going to hurt me. So I'm going to get off first. And again, this goes right back to controlling. I'm going to take control of the situation. You're going to do what I want to do. And the distorted thinking, the cravings for sex and it didn't matter. I just wanted to get what I wanted to get. It didn't matter what that person wanted. It was selfish. It was okay. I can make her do what I want to do because I'm stronger, and she's weak. And that's what it comes down to. I think for me, I can't say that is for a lot of people, but I think that is a common experience that a lot of offenders have through my work and studies. That's what I've kind of found, that those are like the themes of why people commit these kind of crimes. One, it's they have a sexual component for coping. That's their coping skill: sex, masturbation, porn, and all those things. And it turns into this delusion, distorted thinking, in control, the negative self-image. And those type of thinking combined with misogynistic beliefs and negative views of the world, creates this, for me, a state where, hey, I feel so crappy about myself. What will make me feel better is if I have sex and if I have it with her because I want it.
Interesting.
So one of the questions that was posed to me in board was, well, if you knew this person and she knew you, one of my survivors, she would tell on you. Weren't you afraid? Were you going to kill her? And I said, no, I got what I wanted. I didn't need to do that. I got what I wanted. I was satisfied. I didn't care about the consequences. The consequences were insignificant because I didn't have empathy for myself. I didn't have empathy for her. If I had empathy for her, I wouldn't have done what I did. If I had empathy for myself, I would have put myself in the situation where I could have gotten caught, right? I would have cared enough, but I didn't care. I didn't care enough to be safe about it or strategic about it, I guess. I just committed my crime. It was impulsive to a certain extent. Not that it was not planned, because I used to paint these scenarios in my head, of being in situations where I could take advantage of somebody. So for me, it became kind of like a game too. When I was cheating on my wife, I was lying to women, portraying myself as single when I wasn't, deceiving them. And that right there is a form of assault, fraud. It was a game to see if I can trick somebody into having sex with me or having a relationship with me.
That is a lot, Christopher. That is a lot. Brought up so much. And I think what really stands out for me is you feeling ashamed. You didn't want to tell your wife. You didn't tell your family because you took that burden upon yourself, which I see as the crux of then what propelled you into what you did, and the damage to you and everybody obviously involved there. Would you be willing to go and tell me an incident or tell me a little bit about what happened when you were a child?
Yeah, I mean, it's fragmented, so it's not a clear view because, again, like I said, I spent so many years denying it and trying to block out images. But I remember at 5 years old, two older boys, they were probably kids themselves. I knew they were kids themselves, would molest me and another boy. And sometimes would have us perform sexual acts on each other. And that happened over, I think, months, maybe even a year, for as long as I lived in that apartment complex. Then later on, I think I was about 7 years old, and my teenage babysitter, who I had a crush on, lured me into my room and molested me. And a lot of this is even fragmented. Even though I enjoyed that because I liked her, it was still a violation of trust of my family, me, distorting my love-sex relationship or idea of a love-sex relationship. And that went on, I think, a couple of years. I remember incidents where we were alone, or she was my next door neighbor. So I would see her all the time, and she would have me touch her, or she would touch me. But I thought that was thrilling as a kid. I didn't feel so much ashamed of it, but I couldn't tell anybody about it. That was a no-no. So when we weren't around, she would treat me really bad. Like, oh, what are you doing here? I was one of her brother's friends, so it was this front where one minute she's treating me like, some stupid kid, and the next minute she's touching me and making me touch her. And we can't talk about it. And then from that same family, one of the older boys, who was a few years older than me, raped me in his backyard. And that I felt so humiliated, so ashamed. And I thought there was really something wrong with me at that point, because it started to kind of click. I was about 10 years old. I was an athlete already, and I was a wrestler too. So I thought, why didn't I fight? Why didn't I fight this guy off? How come I didn't fight? I must have wanted, there's something wrong with me. I must have wanted this, which goes into the thinking later on in life. Oh, they must have wanted it. They really didn't fight. So those things just kind of reoccur in my life. The different aspects of each of those assaults reoccurred in my life, and how I treated people, how I treated women. Another time he attempted to assault me, but this time I fought him off. And at that point, I was like, okay, I'm going to have to use violence to keep people from hurting me. And then other things were reinforcing those ideas of using violence. I was in sports already. My dad was a high school coach, but I was just a kid. And so I used to hang out with a lot of high school kids that were older boys. And I was like the crash test dummy, hey, get Chris to do this. So in order to fit in order to be part of the crowd, I would do these risky behaviors, to prove my manhood, because there was always that doubt in my mind that, when I was raped by this boy and I didn't fight him off, that I must be gay or something. Maybe I liked it. Maybe there's something wrong with me. So I had to fight that idea that no, I'm not gay. I have to prove my manhood. So every chance I get, I prove my manhood. And that's where the developing of beliefs, thinking about being a man, what a male is. Males don't show emotion. Males use violence. The only accepted emotion is anger. All those themes kind of played a role in my development, my thinking. So after high school, I wanted to join the Marines. Why the Marines? Why not the Army? Why not the Navy? Why not the Air Force? If you watch any of the branches commercials, there's a difference between the Marines and the rest. The other branches show you about career, about going to college, about getting a skill. The Marines, all they show about is kicking somebody's butt. And that's what I want to do.
I didn't realize that.
If next time you watch the commercials, you see the Marines, they look good in their dress blues and they fight.
Yeah.
They don't talk about, hey, join the Marines so you can go to college. Join the Marines so you can learn how to be a technician. Join the Marines if you want to fight, if you want to be the few, the proud. And that's what was so appealing to me is I wanted to be the tip of the sword. I wanted to be at the front. I wanted to be in the fight. I wanted to kick somebody's butt. From all that anger, that's where it came from, to prove myself. So I would do the most craziest things when I was in the service. And I found that I was successful, and it was encouraged, to be such a risk taker, to be so out there. In the Marine Corps, it's like a collection of the captains of the football team of every high school in the country. It's like the top athletes, and you're competing against those guys. So I would just do some of the most craziest things to prove that I was tougher than everybody else. And I found a lot of success in that.
That's crazy how that you got that image in your head and it fits so perfectly with your defense mechanism in order to survive and then also get your needs met of feeling in control, looking for that point in your life where you're a person that's in control, that has your life together and looking to satisfy yourself. And it seems how I read it is just a path to being normal, getting back that kid that had all that damage done.
And I had to learn how to forgive that kid, that he was not an adult. He didn't have mature thinking. He couldn't make the decisions. He did the best he could. And I forgive him. I forgive him for the decisions he made, and he got me to be who the person I am. And I thank God for my family that they were so loving and caring, even though I didn't trust them enough to tell them. They taught me a lot of things and influenced my life in a positive way where I can be accountable. I can figure out how I made these mistakes, how I made these terrible decisions, and be accountable, be responsible for them. My family taught me that, to be responsible. And it took me a while to get there, but I eventually got there. And with their love and their support through the years that I was in prison, it helped me. It helped me get there.
When you talk about your family, who do you consider that to be?
My mom, my dad, my sister, and some extended family.
So a person that comes to my mind as you're describing this, you've got a wife who you're cheating on, and then you commit your crime with. Can you talk a little bit about her and what she was going through?
I don't have any more contact with my wife. We divorced when I was, I think, just a couple years after I went to prison. So we really didn't have much contact after that. She moved on with her life and everything like that. She got remarried. But, I think about how, through my understanding, through my own work in domestic violence, how I was a domestic abuser. I didn't, I'm not trying to mitigate or anything like this, but I didn't physically harm her or beat or slap her or anything like that. But I emotionally terrorized her. I emotionally, spiritually harmed her. I was totally unfaithful to her. I don't know whether she really knew it or suspected it, but I cheated her out of a marriage. I wasn't genuine with her. I almost feel like I deceived her into marrying me, because here she thought she was marrying this person and she was marrying somebody else. I know I caused her a lot of emotional distress. Anytime that she may have suspected that I was cheating, I gaslit her. I made her think, no, you're crazy. There's something wrong with you. For you to think I would do something like that to you. I just told her so many lies and so untruths and stuff that I know I harmed her traumatically. And I'm glad that she found somebody and gotten remarried. But I'm sure it was so hard for her to trust somebody. I think too that maybe they thought it was her fault. Because like I said before, a lot of times survivors, we think it's our fault. Something must have been up with me that he would do something like this. And then the embarrassment and shame of, having your husband go to prison, losing your house, losing your life, the life that you thought you were going to have, losing the future that you thought you were going to have. And I just didn't hurt her. I hurt her family because I betrayed their trust. So I think that she had a tremendous amount of pain due to me. I caused her so much pain and heartache. I hope that one day that I can apologize to her, but, I don't want to bother her in her life by reaching out to her. I think with nowadays technology and through the friends that I have, that I think she may have heard by now that I'm out. If she wants to talk to me, I'll talk with her. And I'll have the opportunity to apologize to her. But I think I've done enough damage to her in her life that I don't need to inflict anything more by reaching out to her.
Well, you're so kind, like we talked about at the beginning of the call, that just pervades me for you. Just kindness, right? You're very sensitive. But you're also so self-actualized. You're able to look at what you've done and talk about it and learn from it, and all the therapy it feels like you've gone through, even though it may not be as traditional as we see it out here, because in prison, you've got to dig deep down and do it alone and, sit in groups and really share it with other people. And then to be able to, talk to your victims or survivors in this case.
I like to really correct something. I'm not doing it alone. I have guys in these support groups. They're with me, my brothers, the supporters and staff that come in to run these groups. Their input, their impact is tremendous. So it's not alone. And that's one of the things I think I learned going to group, that my experience is not unique. Other people have experienced that. And that's one of the things that shame keeps you from realizing, is that you're not alone. There's a lot of people that go through this. And because you're so ashamed that you think, well, this is just happening to me, I can't tell anybody about this. Nobody's going to understand. And when you start going to groups and you start opening it up, you start hearing guys tell their story, you think, I'm not alone. This guy went through the same thing I went through. And so this is not a lone journey. This is a journey that I've taken with many other people. In my preparation for board, I had friends help me. Some of them went to the board, not to say the right things, just to hash out the answers that the board would have, to talk about these things. Explain yourself, explain why you did what you did. I think that's why I sound, it's like you said, I can articulate this was because I've been speaking about it. One person told me in my therapy group that I go to in parole, said, you speak so matter-of-factly, like so absolutely, about your crimes, about the things you've done. It's almost unfeeling, like callous. And I had to share that. Well, it's not that I don't feel anything. It's that I've cried many, many years. And there's a point where you stop crying about things, the harm you caused, you feel it, but you don't let the shame get a hold of you. And where you're feeling so bad that I can't even look at you. So I've dealt with all those emotions, and I still feel the horribleness of what I've done. I know the impact of what I've done. But when I speak now, I speak with accountability. So there's no mistake when I say I raped somebody. I did that. Not, well, I kind of sexually assaulted somebody. I don't use that. I use the language of accountability. So when I talk about what I imagine they went through, that's being accountable. That's not mitigating anything or justifying anything that they experienced. I want to know everything that they experienced, because that lets me know that's what I did. It reminds me that's what I did. Now, I'm not that same person anymore, but I was a maniac. I was a monster at one time. I'm not that person anymore. So I can speak about that scary person like, it was somebody else. But I know it was me. It was something that I did. So I'm not afraid of it. And I really battle shame. I want to make sure that shame has no role in my life. So when I speak about things, I can speak about it openly without any hesitation. And if I say something incorrectly, or if I say it wrong, okay, I'm okay with that. I'll learn from it because this is a learning experience. I don't have all the answers. I don't have, I'm a work in progress still. I'm still learning, gaining deeper insights into what I've done in my life, connecting the dots better. And all that is to make me a better person and to somehow make amends for the things that I've done.
You hit on so many things that are important. And I think when you think about what you and I are building today, this podcast for people to listen to, there's people out there that feel alone. They're hearing your story. They can relate to it. They've either been the victim or the survivor. I mean, you alone, Christopher, encompass so many different parts. So it's wonderful that you found that ability to be able to be in a group. And there's so many people that are free today that do not. They do not go and seek it. They're afraid of it. They don't know where it is. They don't trust the people in that room. So I think if there's one message that I'm hearing loud and clear from you is those people that can identify with any part of your story, that may know someone that can identify with any part of your story, they need to get out and talk. You've had the ability to really work through that and do this healing. And that's one thing I hope for you and I talking today, that people that hear that healing within yourself. I mean, you had mountains to go through of, those different people in your life that taught you that manipulation. And for me, it came out really clearly when you're talking about the older babysitter, the girl. She taught you manipulation at a very young age as, this is how you're going to act around me. This is how I'm going to treat you. But these are really my feelings and this is really what I want. And so the juxtaposition of your brain that had to form into that at such a small age of, having the feeling of being wanted and being hated and having to hide things that aren't natural from your parents and your family. And to have that happen in so many, 3 separate incidences that you talk to is amazing that you could get through 1, but then get through 3. And then it's even hard for me to bring up what it is that you've done to these, teenage girls and the violence and the abuse and the violations that you brought to them. But yet you're at the same time very able to talk about the word accountability and being able to accept what you have done and look at it for what it is. It's just very cathartic to hear from you, because you're every aspect of what happens to a child with harm and how you reacted to it and the normalcy that I see of it and how it, then led you to those crimes. So I want to share that I'm in awe of everything you've done, and to be able to take shame away from you. From what I hear, it's very controlling for people and how they live. So I have an admiration that you're able to identify us with all these emotions and what you've gone through. And, you're such a point that we should reach of acceptance, right? That you're a person that each of us need to look to when we have these doubts. And then you told me in the beginning of you and I talking today, how thankful you are, and you're happy to, have your first apartment and be on your own. And you're thankful for, your days and the sun and talking to people. So, but I don't want to put words into your mouth. Is there a message that you would share with people that are listening?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things I would love to share with people, especially that since this is in San Quentin, I'm sure that guys in prison will hear this. So the first thing I like to say is, like you said, you have to open up and share. You have to tell your story. You have to allow yourself to be vulnerable. If you're a tough guy and you believe that you're a tough guy, things don't hurt you, then beat shame. Beat it. Don't let shame control you. Don't let shame make you fearful of talking about what you've experienced in your life, the harm that you've experienced, and how that shaped your thinking. So That's what I would say to people that are resistant, is that's what's holding you back is shame. The other thing I'd like to say is this. I think often, sometimes, the challenges that I faced out being out here, sometimes are tough. They're tough things to go through. And when I feel things are getting kind of hard, I remind myself of this. My worst day out here is light years better than my best day in prison. And for guys in prison that are listening to this, think about what's your best day in prison. For me, it was like this: getting a package, going to canteen, getting a visit, watching something good on TV, my team winning. That was like a great day for prison, all in one day. That'd be a great day in prison. That is nothing compared to being out here on the streets, seeing the world, being able to put my toes in the sand and watch the surf rush up on it. Trumps that every day. I'd much rather be out here looking out from under a bridge, if I had to live under a bridge, than looking out of a cell. So just remember that. Work your hardest to get out of prison. Do what you have to do to better yourself, to be a better human being, to leave a healthy, healing ripple effect rather than a negative ripple effect.
What message would you have for people that are listening, free people as we call them, that have been a victim of sexual assault?
The same thing. Don't let shame hold you back. It's not your fault. If you experience these traumatic events, it's not your fault. What somebody did to you isn't a reflection on you at all. It has nothing to do with you. You're a beautiful human being. You deserve to be loved. You deserve to be validated. So don't let shame keep you from being that person. Go seek help. Go talk to somebody. Share your story, and you'll find out you're not alone. There's so many of us hurt people out here, and we need each other to heal.
And how would you speak to someone who was the Christopher right before he went to prison, who was there and taking control, in your case, of a young woman's life? How would you talk to someone who's in to that situation? Or how would you talk to yourself prior to?
That's such a difficult thing. But I think I said a little story about a man that I work with that talks about crime. I think I would paint the picture of the consequences of their action, illustrate, how not only are you going to hurt somebody, but you're going to hurt yourself. You're going to get yourself thrown in prison or worse. You're going to hurt your family because they're the ones that are going to be there for you. If you have children, you're going to abandon your children to whatever their life circumstances are going to be brought to them. You're not going to have any control over that. You're going to be in a hellhole. And you're going to have to live with that, the gravity of what you've done. So if there's a way for you to seek help, because you're not going to do it on your own. You're not going to will yourself to be better. You're not going to just say, well, I'm just not going to do that. There's thinking, there's beliefs that are tied into your behaviors. So you have to change your thinking. You have to change your beliefs. If you think this world is a screwed up place and that it's the survival of the fittest, then you need to change that belief. It's not a screwed up place. It's a beautiful place.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many beautiful people in it. There's love, tremendous love in it. And it's there for you. Mm-hmm. You just have to go out there and speak it. You have to make it happen. You have to go out and ask for somebody to help me.
Yeah, that's so powerful. You just want people to get up and do it. Go ask for help. Take the journey with someone else. There's people out there that are professionals, people that will listen, people that can help get you through it. And even if they're not professionals, they're people like you, right? That can sit next to them that have been through it.
I have a couple of friends that have been going through depression. I speak to them about all that. I make myself available to them. And I'm not a psychologist or a doctor or anything. I don't know all the ins and outs of depression, but what I do tell them is you can't just let a thought go away. You have to make it go away. Some of my friends say, well, when I have these thoughts of suicide and stuff, I just try to hold on and, just not think about it anymore. And I say, you can't do that. You have to make yourself not think that. You have to argue with yourself about what a great person you are, what a beautiful human being you are. You have to argue with yourself about that. Because the suicide ideation, the depression is triggering these negative feelings about you, and these negative feelings generate negative thoughts. And they just don't go away. They may go away for a while, but they come back. So you have to combat them by thinking positively, by making yourself think, well, this is not right. I'm just thinking this way because I'm feeling sad. I know I'm a good person. I know I'm valued. I know it would be better for me to be in this world than it is to not be. And you have to convince yourself of that. So that's how you change your thinking. That's how you change your beliefs. You have to work at it. They just don't come on their own.
Oh my gosh, you're such a power and such a force of so much good, Christopher. and I just wrote that. I wrote that down, what you said. So you can't let a thought go away. You have to make it go away. You have to argue with it. You have to get yourself beyond it, get rid of the negativity so you can, I say way too much, is change that narrative in yourself. So yeah, that was beautiful to hear that you have to work at it. And when I think about little Christopher, who was 5 years old and sexually abused, you had to go back there and realize that there was good, right? That you weren't that person that happened to.
I practice this positive self-talk. When I start thinking negatively or having a negative thought, I don't dwell. I don't let it dwell. I start thinking right away, why am I thinking like this? What is it that's causing me to feel this way or to think this way? And I break it down in my mind. And sometimes I'll be in the car driving and it looks like I might be on the phone talking but I'm talking to myself. I'm talking to myself out of thinking what I'm thinking. So I went on a day trip down to LA, which is about an hour away from where I live. I was having a great time. I was on Venice Beach. I was hanging out in Santa Monica, but I had to be back because I had group at the transition home that I lived in that evening. As I'm driving back, it's about 4:00 in the afternoon. I'm getting sour about it. Man, I have to go to this stupid group. It's such a waste of time. I'm just having all these thoughts and stuff like that. I'm looking at the beach. I'm reflecting on what a great time I had. I wish I could stay longer, but I have to go to this group. So I'm driving back. I'm going up by Malibu along the coast. I'm looking out and there's this beautiful ocean. Blue is blue. The sun is reflecting, it's sparkling. And I think to myself, what would I be doing right now if I was in prison? So I looked at the clock when it was like 4:00. And I'm like, oh, I'd be sitting on my bunk getting ready for count. And I thought to myself, what am I complaining about? First of all, I'm driving along the coast of California, beautiful coast, beautiful ocean. I just had a great day at Venice Beach in Santa Monica on the beach. Now I'm driving up the coast. And not only that, I got the windows rolled down. I got the sunroof open. I got the music blaring. And I'm driving an effing Cadillac that somebody gave me. What do I have to complain about? Yeah. If I was inside right now, I would give my left arm to be out here dealing with going to group in the evening. I had to convince myself, that what I was thinking was so ridiculous, that I should be happy about where I'm at right now. So that's what I'm talking. That's the example what I talk about. You have to push negative thoughts out of your head. You have to convince them that they don't belong there.
There's a question that I'm sure you're prepared for. It's not an easy question, but it's a question that I'm sure you're prepared for. What would you say to the people that think you shouldn't be out here? What you did, Christopher, you don't deserve to walk the earth. You don't deserve to be in Malibu. You don't deserve to be driving your car. What would you say to them?
You have the right to believe that. I can't say anything that will convince you otherwise, other than I am so grateful to be here. It's not up to me to convince you. I know that there's going to be people that dislike me for what I've done, that hold against me, that are going to reject me. But I can't control that. That's out beyond my control. And I don't want to control it. You are free to think and believe how you want to believe. And it's not for me to make you think otherwise. If you can look at me and say, well, you know what? He's doing positive things. At least he's not hurting somebody. If that's satisfying for you, great. But I'm not worried about really so much what other people think about me or how they feel about me. I have too much on my plate to be worried about what somebody else thinks about me.
I'm with you. We kind of get that at our age, don't we? You can't live through that. We're good people. It's so great to hear you be so positive and just giving us those positive nuggets to get us through. We all have that inner critic that pops up for some of us more often than others, especially sometimes when you get in bed at night and you're alone. But it also gives a testament to you to being in prison for 25 years and still being able to come out and be as positive as you are. So I want to thank you so much, Christopher, for sitting down with us today. You've been an enlightenment in so many different ways. There's so much that I take away, how much I've learned from you today. I think about shame. I think about loneliness. I think about accountability. I think about harm. You've been a plethora of information for me, and I hope our listeners as well. So thank you for coming today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I just hope that people could take something positive from this and help themselves get something that's going to better their lives.
I sure hope so too. Thank you.
Christopher's story is both heartbreaking and inspiring. From his challenging childhood and the harm he inflicted on 2 teenage girls and many others to the transformative work he has done and continues to do. He and Jane have sat on stage together and addressed crowds of people, discussing their lives and the power of self-awareness. I deeply admire Christopher for his conscientious efforts to better both himself and the community around him. I eagerly anticipate his future contributions to the world. And to Christopher, I want to extend my heartfelt thanks for opening up and allowing us a glimpse into your world and the life you lived before committing your crime. Your willingness to be vulnerable demonstrates the significant amount of work you've put into understanding and transforming yourself. I truly believe your story is one that needs to be heard, and I hope it is received with openness and contributes to healing for all who listen. If you or someone you know is interested in participating in a victim offender dialogue, please reach out to your local Department of Corrections. For those interested in potentially hearing my unfiltered interview with Christopher, please visit our Patreon account. I hope you find his journey as informative as I have. In our next set of episodes, we'll be delving into a deeply moving story of loss, accountability, and the power of forgiveness. First, we'll sit down with Elle, a mother whose life was forever changed by a tragic loss of her daughter, Emily, in a drunk driving accident caused by Alan. Elle's journey toward healing and her choice to engage in a victim offender dialogue provide a powerful perspective on trauma, compassion, and the possibility of redemption. Then, in the following episode, we'll hear from Alan, who is currently serving time at San Quentin State Prison for his role in Emily's death. He shares his challenging path to sobriety, his immense gratitude for Elle's forgiveness, and his hopes for helping others through his story. Stay tuned. These episodes offer a rare insight into how accountability, remorse, and empathy can transform lives. Be kind to yourself, and see you next week.